Board. Welcome to the 19th Represents. I would love if we could maybe start this conversation with another introduction. We just heard Emily introduce you, but we have another special guest with us today that I would love to meet, for our viewers to meet.
Hi, yes, this is Miley Pearl, my youngest daughter. She's 2.5.
Hi.
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 So Miley.
Yeah, she's saying hi. So, yes, my mom usually helped me take care of her, but she's at physical therapy this morning. So I've got both girls by myself. I'm sorry. But
That's
working mom, working from home.
That's exactly right. That's how it is, and we appreciate both of you making the time today. We know that you've got a lot going on.
No worries. She put on lipstick for the occasion, though.
Looks great. So we're continuing a day of conversations on political firsts, including yours. You are known for breaking ground as the first Thai American elected to Congress, the first woman with a disability to be elected to Congress, and the first senator to give birth while in office. But I'd actually like to start with a question that I also asked your colleague, Senator Cortez Masto, which is if you would mind telling us about a first in your life, either professional or personal, that is meaningful to you that we might not already know about you.
I mean, at a critical point in my career, I was the first female and I think first non-white maybe commander of my Army helicopter unit, the the Mad Dogs based out of Chicago. So
that sounds like an incredible accomplishment. You are well known for your public service. And before we get into sort of the public service aspect of things and the moment that we're in now, I actually want to go back a little bit further, if you don't mind. Would you be talking about your dreams? It kind of seems fitting with your daughter here. If you could talk about the dreams that you had as a child or as a young woman, if you saw yourself, looking ahead at this point in your life to be here, what were your dreams then? What are your dreams now? And do they include serving as vice president?
Well, I never thought I would be a United States Senator. My dream as a child, I never thought I would be a helicopter pilot. My dream as a child was to join the Foreign Service. I grew up following my dad, who was, he first went over to Southeast Asia as a soldier, and then he served as a Department of the Army civilian for a number of years in Thailand when I was born. And I grew up thinking I would join the Peace Corps or become a foreign area officer, a foreign service officer. I think from the time I was about 9 or 10, I wanted to be an ambassador. So that was my dream growing up. And I was actually on track pursuing that dream when I was pursuing my PhD and decided that, maybe going with the Army could be part of that dream, and here I am.
All right, so I would love to talk a little bit more about your military experience. You are a veteran and a war hero. You earned a Purple Heart after being injured in an RPG attack in Iraq in 2004, but your service with the Army began long before then, long before 9/11. So as someone who has served your country in such significant change, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you saw 9/11 shape the trajectory of our country and how that compares to the moment that we're living in now.
Well, 9/11 certainly shaped the trajectory of our country. I knew that we would go after those who attacked us on 9/11 in Afghanistan. And I figured that would be something we would crush them, destroy them, and let that would be the end of it. It never occurred to me that 9/11 would be used as an excuse to invade Iraq. And now it took our eyes off the ball in Afghanistan. So we were never able to resolve the situation in Afghanistan. And we were distracted by Iraq before we refocused on Afghanistan almost 10 years later. And so here we are, right? We still have troops overseas. We still have people in harm's way. Bye, honey. We're still pursuing these wars. And think about the trillions of dollars that have been spent in Iraq, for example. We sort of diverted our attention, and now we're in a place where we are facing an economic crisis at home. We're facing a global pandemic, and we have spent so much of our nation's treasures pursuing OIF and OEF in such a way that we've not been able to focus on all the things that we need to focus on in America, such as our manufacturing sector, such as making sure that we continue to grow our economy, making sure that we're ready to respond to a global pandemic. All of these things have sort of added up on top of each other, but it's been exacerbated by President Trump, who has refused to act as a president, refused to act as a commander-in-chief, and has botched a response to this pandemic so terribly that's now affected every other aspect of our country, from healthcare to our economy.
Let's talk about the crisis that we're dealing with as a country right now. We asked our readers for questions for you, and several of them wanted to talk about the politicization of the military right now, and the militarized response to this summer's protests. So I'm thinking about General Mark Milley's appearance with President Trump in Lafayette Park as the National Guard was tear gassing peaceful protesters nearby. I'm thinking about Army helicopters flying show of force operations in Washington, D.C. I'm thinking about the National Guard being called in to back up local law enforcement in 28 states. The Pentagon has ordered a review of those actions. What do you make of the military's involvement in summer's protests?
It's a direct result of President Trump's politicization of our military and politicization of all the different agents of federal government. This is what he does, and it's wrong. It cannot, it's unacceptable. He continues to do it, and we have to stop him. The military is an impartial, non-political arm of the United States that is supposed to be protecting and defending the American people. They should not be used to go out there and suppress peaceful protesters who were exercising their First Amendment rights. This shows Donald Trump's utter failure as a commander-in-chief, that he would do this to the military. And I had a long conversation with General Milley, and he apologized for that, appearing with President Trump, and he said it was wrong. And he's absolutely right, and it is not acceptable, and it should never, ever happen again.
You've also been vocal in the wake of George Floyd protests on the need for national dialogue on national monuments, and you've been attacked in America for doing so. How would you define patriotism?
You know, patriotism comes in many ways, but I think one of the most patriotic things we can do, this is Abigail, my 5-year-old. One of the most patriotic things you can do is to speak your minds. That's how we became a nation, right? It was peaceful protesters dumping tea in the Boston Harbor against taxation without representation. And the most American thing that you can do is to speak your mind and stand up to those in power and make them listen to the will of the people. And frankly, I think it's absolutely wrong that this president wants to stop people from peacefully demonstrating and expressing their personal opinions.
I have to ask too, just about the pandemic on a personal level. You know, seeing you here with your daughters, so many mothers are relating to you being on this Zoom call with me right now with your kids, and balancing working and taking care of your family, keeping your family safe. Can you talk about how this pandemic has changed you as a person, as a mother, as a public servant?
Yeah, you know, I always knew as a working mom that working families had challenges, and I certainly dealt with them after I gave birth to Abigail and then Miley. But frankly, this pandemic shows how stretched thin people are. I mean, look at me right now, right? I'm home. My one person that helps me take care of the kids, my mother, had to have knee replacement surgery, so she's in therapy. I'm like so many Gen X moms out there, barely holding it together. I'm supposed to be homeschooling Abigail right now. In the morning is when I'm supposed to homeschool her. You know, I can't go shut myself up in an office space and just do all my Zoom calls uninterrupted because I have to be here watching my 2 girls. And this is the chaos of life. But you know what? I am so privileged. I get to work from home. I get to do this and have this talk with you from home, as disruptive as it is. But think about the mom who's working 2 jobs at McDonald's and somewhere else trying to make ends meet, or the single parent trying to hold it all together. It really has, you know, I fought for family leave. I fought for childcare. I fought for universal pre-K, but this has made it so clear to me how badly we need it in this country, because I live this reality every single day. With all the privileges of being a United States Senator, it's still a struggle. And so just imagine with all of those other working families where maybe one parent has been laid off, they don't know if they're going to make ends meet and if they're going to be able to pay the rent next month or put food on the table. And so when I go into these negotiations, it's with these very real considerations on my mind.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you a little bit about paid leave, but I'll back up a step and also ask you about schools in particular. I was going to say turning to the fall, but for many, it's a week and 2 weeks away. You were called on by President Trump to serve on his pandemic task force on reopening the economy. I'd like to know, first of all, where do you stand on this question of reopening schools that is down to the wire for so many parents? And if you could expand a little bit more on y'all are in the midst of negotiations right now. What are the prospects of getting paid leave through Congress and expanding the resources that Americans are looking for right now?
Yes. So you see what I'm going through, right? This is what it's like for families right now when schools don't reopen. And again, I want to reiterate, I can work from home. My husband can work from home. But if you had a job where you were a grocery store clerk or where you were a nurse in a hospital or anywhere, you're not going to be able to do this. And so I desperately want the economy to be reopened. I want schools to be reopened, but I also don't want my daughter to get sick and my family members to die from COVID-19, because that's what we're looking at. And until we get testing done in a way that is available, that is low cost or free, and that has results that you can get results back within 1 or 2 days, we're not going to be able to reopen the economy. It has to be widespread. I've said this time and again on this task force that President Trump put me on, but let me tell you, the task force has barely met. They've not really taken any advice from the members, and all they've done is just talk at us. I mean, the first meeting of the task force, the president got on there and talked at us for 45 minutes of a 1-hour meeting, saying how great everything was going. And we all know that's a lie. We all know that's not true. We're now at 150,000 Americans dead, and more getting sick and more dying every single day. And yet he wants to push to open the economy and put kids in school. Well, listen, I want my kids in school too. Not only is it disruptive, to try to do everything at home, it's also bad for her to not be in school. I want her in school because I'm afraid that she's falling behind because I can't do the job of a trained educator. But I can't put her in school unless I know that she's going to be safe. And right now, our schools are not a safe place for our kids to be. They don't have the resources. We should have more money in this next pandemic package to our schools, to our municipalities, so that they can provide all of the cleaning, the PPE, all of the additional things that we need to do to keep our citizens safe. And the Republicans won't put that money in there for school, more money for schools and more money for our municipalities. It's really shameful that they think that they can open the economy without actually doing it in a responsible way, because it's going to lead to a second and a third and more waves of this pandemic, and more Americans are going to get sick and die. And frankly, I'm not willing to let that happen.
I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about women in the military. The DoD's annual report on sexual assault in the military came out at the end of April. And there was a 3% increase in sexual assault cases and a 10% increase in sexual harassment complaints. But it's widely acknowledged that those cases are underreported to begin with. Several of our readers asked specifically about a case close, just up the road from us, Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen, who was found dead 2 months after going missing from Fort Hood in Colleen in April. Her family says she was being harassed by a fellow soldier but didn't report it. What's your take on the Guillen case, and more broadly, what needs to be done to protect women in the military from sexual assault?
Well, everyone in the military needs to be protected from sexual assault. Women are definitely vulnerable and are victims of military sexual trauma, but so are men. There are LGBTQ crimes, so we need to make sure that the military is assault-free. And I actually, in the Vanessa Guillen case, have been communicating with the Department of the Army, requesting several things. One, I wanted to know how she managed to go missing, and they never conducted a search for her like they would if a rifle went missing. So let me just say that in the military, in the Army, if somebody loses a rifle, if a rifle is missing from the armory, that entire unit shuts down, everybody gets locked down, and they start looking for that missing rifle. They didn't do that for a soldier. They didn't do that for one of their own. They didn't even check. My understanding is the office area where she worked, because it turns out now it was a horrific crime that she was bludgeoned to death in her workspace. So nobody in that amount of time went to check if there was blood residue in that workspace where she was killed. This is absolutely unacceptable. So we're looking at and forcing the Army and DOD to change their policies on when a service member goes missing, what those policies are and what they do to try to find that service member. And then as far as military sexual assault is concerned, it's a scourge, it's a cancer from within, it needs to be ended. And we've been working on this for well over a decade now, and there's still issues. And so we continue to pursue it. I think that we're going to continue to have problems until we have more diversity in the top ranks of the military, until we have more women in leadership, more women who are the platoon leaders and the platoon sergeants and the commanders, and more women four-star generals, to really force this change to happen. It's incredible to me that she was not able to report the harassment, or that she didn't feel safe to report harassment. I want to know what happened to the sexual harassment and rape prevention program in that unit, because there was supposed to be a program in place where she could feel safe to go report the harassment. And that very much is deeply concerning to me that didn't happen. And I'm concerned that this is across all the branches of government. So we're looking at this very closely. We had an amendment that we put into this year's defense budget led by Senator Gillibrand. It passed in a bipartisan way. Last year it was stripped out. And you know, we're hoping that we can continue to work on this well into the future.
A related question from one of our readers, Marianne Connolly from Cedar Park. She wanted to know how the VA could better support women exiting military service, particularly with ongoing battles related to sexual assault or PTSD from their time in service. What's happening at the VA level?
So there's several things that have been changed at the VA. I actually was able to participate in some of these changes when I was part of the Obama Biden administration at the VA. It started off with, I would go visit VA hospitals, and there would not be a single picture of a servicewoman on the walls. We all men. I said, where are the pictures of the servicewomen on the wall? It's like, you think that women didn't serve. And then, oh, no. See, back in this back corridor, there's a picture. So, well, you need to make this absolutely clear that, you know, women and people of color serve as well. And then we had to look at how the women's health clinics were being set up, because oftentimes women who were going to the women's health clinic who needed, you know, help with military sexual trauma after effects, with mental health counseling, a regular OBGYN exam, were having to wait in the common areas with all the men, and they didn't feel comfortable. So I said, well, let's have in the women's health area, we came up at the VA with this separate waiting rooms with those women who wanted to wait in a separate area. They could. And then I asked for making sure that there were women veterans in every women health clinic. There wasn't. And so now VA has been working very hard towards putting in every single VA health center a female veteran, at the very least, in every women's health clinic. And then we have to do things that have to do with how women are being discharged from the military. This is not a VA issue. This is a DOD issue. So a lot of women were released from the military with dishonorable or less than honorable discharges due to psychological conditions or behavioral problems that were the result of a military sexual trauma that happened during their time of service. So we have to change these women's discharge status. We have to upgrade them. And then we have to, at the VA, make sure that they recognize military sexual trauma as a service-related disability, so that these women can get the care that they need for the injuries that they received while they were serving this country. And so it's an ongoing thing. We have to constantly be upgrading VA services to make sure that it is responsive to all of our servicemen and women, no matter their gender orientation, identity, color, where they're from, that every veteran gets the care that they've earned at the VA.
I want to talk about November before we run out of time, and talk about voting specifically. President Trump has repeatedly tried to sow doubts about the legitimacy of vote by mail, which seems obviously to be a pretty important way for people to be able to vote safely this year. The reality is that there is no evidence to support the idea of massive vote by mail fraud. but voting is obviously going to be more complicated as states are trying to support both in-person and absentee voting this year. So given the pandemic and that the election is just around the corner, what should Americans expect to be different about voting this year, and what is your party doing to ensure that people are able to turn out to vote and to turn out to vote safely?
Well, we need to make sure that we get funding into this next budget to get out to the states and municipalities so they can conduct voting and voting by mail safely during this global pandemic. Look, President Trump botched his response to the pandemic. We have now, as I said, 150,000 dead Americans and millions more who are sick with it. And he's trying to use that as a reason to delay the election because he knows that he's going to lose. According to the Constitution, he can't delay the election, by the way. And now, after months of him sowing confusion and spreading misinformation about vote by mail, he's actually saying, if you're from Florida, you can do it. It's okay in Florida. Interestingly, that's a major swing state that he needs in order to win re-election. Look, the only thing that's clear right now is that this president is scared that he's going to lose in November, right? I voted by mail from Iraq, from a combat zone. If I can vote by mail from a combat zone, if it's good enough for the troops overseas and good enough for Donald Trump himself to vote by mail, then it's good enough for all Americans. And I think we should have widespread vote by mail so that people can cast their votes and exercise their constitutionally protected rights without also endangering their own lives. As you look at what happened in Georgia in the primaries, you saw people were standing in line for 8, 9, 10 hours to vote in the middle of a global pandemic. We can't have that happen again. And the president can make up all of the lies and all of the about fraud that he wants, about contradicting himself about Florida, but it won't change the fact that voting by mail is safe and it's secured and it works. And we need to make sure that he can't do things like slow down the U.S. Postal Service so that they can't deliver ballots on time, or that he can scare people off and state misinformation about the security of vote by mail. What I say to people is, sign up, vote by mail. Our troops are doing it from combat zones. You can certainly do it from your homes here in the United States. And then we're going to work as hard as we can to force Mitch McConnell to put money into the next package to make sure that states and municipalities can indeed carry out vote by mail in a safe and efficient manner.
Another question from one of our readers, Melissa Rule of West Hartford, wanted to know, the theme of the week is obviously representation for us. Why do you think women are less likely to run for public office, and what are you doing to change or encourage women and minority representation in public office?
Well, so there have been multiple studies. I think Emily's List, the group that supports women who run for office, actually did a study, and it shows that women have to be asked to run 7 times before they say yes to running. They just don't think of themselves. This is not a career field that they think about getting into. I didn't think I was going to go into politics. I wanted to be a helicopter pilot and work in the Foreign Service or in the Peace Corps. It's just not what women generally think of as a career field. But women must be encouraged to run, because until we have equal representation of people of color, of different genders, different sexual identities in our government would never truly reflect their American people in an accurate way. And so we are going to have issues that are left out. Not that men can't think about family leave and childcare, but women tend to live that reality every single day. That's why we need younger women, women who are currently raising their children in office, as well as folks from all different walks of life, just the way our country is. And so, you know, we have to encourage more women to run. And I also encourage more veterans to run. And I tell veterans, if you want to run for office, call me up. I will help you. If you want to run as a Democrat, I will help you there. If you want to run as a Republican, that's good too. I will put you in touch with the right people, because we need more veterans running as well. Same with Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. I'm very proud that this year, for example, right now we have over 40 women of Asian descent running in races across the country for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. That's remarkable, but we still have a long way to go.
We talked a little bit about the impact of this pandemic on women and women in the workforce. We've been reporting on this at the 19th. I'm sure that many, women, mothers who are listening to you now are inspired, but also so daunted by, the current climate. And so I'm just curious if there's one piece of advice that you had to give them if they're considering running, or one thing that you wish that you had known before you ran. Like, what advice would you give to women who are considering thinking about public office themselves?
Well, it's a two-part advice. One, you can do it and there will be support for you. You don't have to do it by yourself. And two, it's going to be hard. Don't believe the lie that there's a balance, that there's balance. There's no balance. You're going to be struggling every step of the way, but when you get into office, you are actually going to be able to make change happen and affect the laws of this country, the policies of our neighborhoods and our towns and our cities and our states in a way that will make your family and all the other families' lives better. So do it. But there is no such thing as work-life balance. You're going to be struggling. It's going to be hard, but the end result is absolutely worth it. And what I always tell people is what I learned in the Army: 80% solution. You don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Just take that 80% solution and run with it. Right? I got on this call with you on time, but I had to do it with a baby on my lap. But that's what you're going to have to do, and you're just going to have to be realistic and be forgiving to yourself. And it's going to be tough, but you can do it. There'll be support to help you every step of the way.
Well, Senator, we have time for one more question, and I would be remiss if I didn't go back to the beginning of our conversation and just give you one more chance. We were talking about dreams at the beginning of this call, and your dreams specifically, and I just wonder if you have anything to say about why you would want or should be the next vice president.
Vice President Biden is going to make that decision, and I'm going to let him make that decision on his own. Any one of the women that have been mentioned in the media are well qualified. It's a fantastic thing to say about the Democratic Party that there's that many of us, women of color, women of all different backgrounds, who can actually step up and be vice president of the United States. That says a lot about the large umbrella that the Democratic Party is. And I'm just Team Biden all the way. I just want to get him elected because my overall guiding principle my entire adult life has been to protect and defend my country. And right now, my country is hurting. Americans are hurting. We need our wounds bound. We need to come back together as a nation. We need a leader with grit, with tenacity, with perseverance, with empathy, who understands those working families that may not be able to literally put food on the table tonight. And Joe Biden is that man. And he's going to be that president who's going to lead us out of the pandemic crisis, out of the economic crisis, out of the global national security crisis that we are in. And so whatever position he wants me to play on Team Biden, I'm willing to play that position because I believe strongly that we need him in order to help solve the many problems facing our country. For me, it's all about what makes America strong, what protects and defends this great nation. And if he says, Tammy, I want you to be vice president, then I'll be honored to serve. If he says, Tammy, the Senate is where you need to be, help me pass the laws, such as universal pre-K, then that's where I'll be. But I'm going to leave him to make that decision on his own. It's a tough one, but he knows what he's doing, and I trust in him.
Well, Senator, thank you so much. You've got a lot of work going on in the Senate and at home, and obviously we are incredibly grateful that you were able to join us for the kickoff of our 19th Represent Summit. Thanks so much for being with us here today.
Thank you.
And up next, we will have a word from our presenting sponsors, Intuit and Goldman Sachs, as well as some trivia to see how much you know about women who have fought for a seat at the table in this country and beyond.